Hey guys, Tammy here, and in this video, we're going to talk about when CPS and well checks backfire, okay? Now, let me also say DFS. CPS is child welfare. That's called something different in almost every state. I've heard it called DFS, DCFS, CWS, CPS. There's all kinds of acronyms for it. So all of those things are one and the same. Well checks come from police instead of child welfare. And you want to use these when they're needed, but they can definitely backfire when you're using them inappropriately. So we're going to talk about that and talk about how to know when it's appropriate and when it's not. Let me just remind you, if you like this video, please hit like on it in the corner down there. You know where it is. If you like the channel and the content, please subscribe. That way you get notified as new videos are released. Also, please, as always, share this on social media. It's the only way that I can reach the thousands and thousands and probably millions of people that are dealing with a narcissistic person and dealing with all these little types of custody issues. So help me help everybody else by sharing the content that you find particularly helpful. Let me just first talk about the difference between like a well check and a child welfare, CPS, DCFS, DFS report. Okay. A well check is essentially when you call the police and you say, hey, I think there might be a problem with my child. I haven't heard from them, whatever. Could you go over to the other parents? I've tried to contact the other parent, all this kind of thing. Could you go over to the other parents and please do a well check and just make sure my child's okay? I would say that those should be, any of these should be not the normal default, right? It shouldn't be your go-to. It shouldn't be the thing you do. It should be there's some crisis, some extreme situation, something really unusual going on. And so we're going to do this. The problem is I do think that a well check a lot of times is more appropriate than a child welfare call. But what you really want to discern is, do I have any information that actually leads me to believe there's a problem? Or am I just afraid there's a problem? Because when people are acting out of that place of fear and they're just afraid there's a problem because they don't know, they haven't heard, they're feeling anxious, they haven't gotten a response, all those kinds of things, that can really be seen as trying to interfere in the other parent's parenting time. Or sometimes it can be seen as trying to alienate the other parent. And honestly, I'm not a big fan of communication between the two worlds. I know a lot of you are probably screaming at the camera as I say that. And I have lots of clients who do that very thing and are like, what? No way. Yeah, I'm not a fan of it. I think it puts the kids in the middle. And I think that when the child is with the other parent, it's the other parent's parenting time and you got to let them have it, just like you want to have your parenting time. And you don't want to be, doing things that are perceived as you not supporting the other parent or you trying to interfere in their time. If you are going to send the police over for a well check, make sure that you're doing it out of, okay, they were like, let's say they were supposed to return the child at 5 p.m. and it's now 8 p.m. and the child's not home and you haven't heard from them and they haven't responded to any of your texts. You've tried to call, nothing. Okay, that might be an appropriate time for a well check. But like, oh, I told the other parent to have the child call me at 2 p.m. and now it's 2:30 and I haven't heard from anybody. And I don't really have a court order that says that. And the other parent didn't send a note back saying they would or acknowledging my note. I just sent that. And so now I'm expecting that. But because I haven't heard, I want to do a well check report. That's probably not appropriate. Just because you demanded something, the other parent didn't comply, and now you're angry about it, and now you want to just do a well check 30 minutes after it should have occurred because you're upset that they didn't do what you told them to do. That's a different issue, right? Or you're making all this stuff up in your head about why you think that they didn't call you back when they're probably just busy, or, maybe the kid had activities that day, or, there was something else going on that caused it. So again, you want to use these really judiciously, because I find that when people overuse these things, it really, the court gets really, really upset about it. And, well checks are one thing, but when we get into CPS and child welfare, DCFS and all that, those reports really, really can be problematic, because when you have a case where you're saying, well, I made 6 child welfare reports this year. Okay, again, 6 child welfare reports are probably not valid, are probably not reasonable. Because number one, if there was something going on, child welfare probably would have figured it out at least 3 to 4 reports in, right? I mean, sometimes it takes them a couple times. I'm not going to say they always get it on the first try, but if there is something really severe going on, like a sexual assault or abuse or something like that, generally you'll start seeing some kind of action taken, or some sort of what they call a safety plan. They put some sort of parameters in place of how they're going to remedy the situation. So if you call child welfare and then that investigation is closed and they didn't find anything, then you call again and it's closed and they don't find anything. And then you call again and it's closed and they don't find anything. And you call again and and that goes on 6 or 7 times. Guess what? Then the court's going to go, well, you're just trying to attack the other parent because you called 6 or 7 times and every single time they don't find anything. Then the problem's you, or your anxiety, or your stress, or your fear, and it's not the other parent. And I mean, this is the court's view. I'm not saying that maybe you don't truly feel like something's going on. You may truly feel that way. The problem is you don't have enough evidence of that right now. And because you don't, then the court starts viewing you as interfering with the other parent and causing problems. Okay, so I always tell people, like, one of the things people will frequently say to me is, well, the other parent has this many CPS reports against them. And again, DCFS, DFS, whatever it's called in your jurisdiction. But in California, it's called CPS. So that's kind of what I default to. If somebody calls me and says, hey, the other parent has 4 CPS reports against them in the last 6 months, the next question I always ask is, well, are those cases still open and ongoing investigations, or have they been closed? And if they're closed, how were they closed? Because there's 3 ways it's closed. Usually it's either unfounded, which means they don't have any evidence that anything happened at all. They don't see a problem, no issue on their part. The second is founded, which is like, yeah, there's a problem. And normally when it's founded, again, you'll have some sort of safety plan. You'll have some sort of remedy that they suggest or something. They're not just going to say, oh, yeah, there's a problem and then do nothing about it. Or they say inconclusive. And inconclusive means I'm not real sure. I get the feeling that there's probably something, but I don't have enough evidence to really show anything concrete. So we're going to call it inconclusive. Now, I would say the vast majority of CPS reports are closed unfounded, which essentially means nothing happened in their opinion. So if you have 6 CPS reports for the year against the other parent, that especially if they came from you, and those are all unfounded, and you keep calling, guess what? You're probably eventually going to be seen as the problem, and you're going to either, have your parenting time reduced. Maybe the other parent gets full legal custody, different things that can start to happen because you're just not cooperating and you're causing all of this grief and conflict that is then affecting the child. And that's the court's biggest concern. It's not really so much that like, oh, I'm going to take your parenting away because you're behaving badly. It's not that. It's that, look, you're creating this high conflict environment that is very detrimental to your child. If you won't stop or get help or therapy or coaching or something to help you figure this out, then I have no choice. The only other way that I can reduce the conflict as the judge is to reduce your parenting time. So sometimes they're left with no choice because they're trying to give you a chance to get religion and you don't. Okay, you cannot be calling child welfare out of your fear that something's going to happen. And honestly, a lot of times, even your child telling you that something's happening isn't enough. It's like, well, how old is your child? 4. Okay, well, a 4-year-old is not deemed a reliable witness most of the time by the courts or the police or anybody else. Before the age of 5, a child can't even distinguish between imagination and reality in a lot of ways. Okay, that concrete perception in their brain doesn't start to happen developmentally until about 6 or 7 years old. So they just aren't seen as a reliable witness. Your ex is probably not going to get prosecuted on the words of your 4-year-old alone. I'm not saying that means therefore nothing's happening, but I'm saying that sometimes you can't do anything until it gets bad enough for there to be a problem. And I know as a parent, that's a horrendous thing to say. It feels very unsettling. But what's worse, waiting for that to happen or calling in over and over and over and over again, only to have the child then placed with the other parent more because you're seen as the difficult, high conflict one. That is called choosing the lesser of two evils, unfortunately. Okay, so if you'd like to learn more about my coaching services, you can go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There's a link on that page where you can book a time to speak to one of my staff and learn more about my services and how I might be able to support you on this journey. Talk to you guys next time.
We'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the